Hello everyone, welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. We're coming off a sensational weekend of boxing. I really enjoyed the card in Los Angeles on Saturday night for you guys, Sunday morning / afternoon / nearly the whole day for me. It definitely was a long one, but some great fights. And today I want to get into the truth of what happened in that Terence Crawford Israil Madrimov fight. Before the fight, I did an analysis, as you all know. It's been my best video so far, it really popped off. And what I observed before the fight didn't play a factor on the night. And I want to look at the reasons why that was, because, you know, all of Madrimov's fights so far, he's been very aggressive. He's lunged in from distance and been very reckless with his hands and his defensive positioning. And I always caveated what I was saying about what he did was that on the night, we just, you know, and this is what I always say in boxing, you just don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how someone's going to come into the ring, if they're going to be tactically adaptable, if they're going to devise a game plan, if they're going to do things, not do things, that they would normally do because they know what will happen. And a lot of people are coming off this fight. I've heard crazy stuff like this is a fix. I've heard people saying that, you know, Madrimov actually won the fight, that Crawford is far too small for 154 pounds. There's so much thought, so much opinion. I want to cut through all of that and I want to do a game film analysis on the fight. I want to tell you exactly what I think happened in there that meant the fight played out the way that it did, because I was watching it and I was actually very impressed with what Madrimov was able to do on the night. I thought he was extremely disciplined. I thought he was extremely thoughtful in his work, and he clearly had a game plan. And Crawford, I think he'd seen all the things that I'd seen in that initial game film analysis, and as a result, he was waiting. But we'll get into the breakdown. But I just want to say thank you to those of you that tuned into the live stream. I had a good time doing it, and I think it's something I'll continue with in the future. Again, it's all part of the experiment on this channel, but let's get into this. So first off, I just want to take a very quick interview from Terence Crawford, because to me, this gives a lot of indications about what Crawford was expecting in the fight and why things played out the way that they did. So let's have a quick listen.
I felt great. It was no different from 147, to be honest. Israil just was a strong opponent. You know, we knew that coming in the gate. It was his patience. He was just patient. He was just waiting. He'll feint, and just keep feinting until he get a little closer. So he was real patient in there. He wasn't rushing in with nothing. He wasn't winging those wild winging shots like we normally seen him in the previous fights. He was very disciplined.
So those are the key words there, guys. Patience, feints, you know, discipline. As I was saying constantly before the fight, Madrimov loves to lunge in, and I feel like I've overused that word now. I almost never want to hear it again. But he loves to lunge into space. His hands are a little loose when he does that normally, and he's much more aggressive typically with his offense. He doesn't worry about attacking from distance. He doesn't worry about getting his feet right first. And frankly, it can look a little reckless. He'll do gazelle hooks from close range, really open up his body, expose his chin. We've seen all this stuff from him before. And then I showed you shots of Crawford in the Spence fight in particular, and how he was able to counter very similar things that Spence did in that fight. And I'm absolutely certain that Madrimov saw those moments from saw those moments from Crawford in that Spence fight and went, you know what, the way I normally go about things, that's not going to work for me here. This guy's serious. This guy is strong. He's not too small for 154 pounds, and I'm going to get really hurt if I just rush him. And we saw that on the night as well. Crawford definitely wasn't too small. Madrimov definitely physically more imposing, but he didn't really use it. You know, he didn't really rough him up close. It wasn't a close quarters encounter really. And even when they were up close, typically Crawford was the one doing the better inside work to the body and whatnot. But we'll get into the fight now. I'll do a game film analysis for you now, and I want to show you some of the things that Madrimov was able to do and some of the ways that Crawford managed to win this fight, because for me, he did win the fight. I scored at 116-113. I had a draw in one of the rounds, hence the 113. So we'll get into that right now. So the first thing that I want to show you is how Madrimov used feints in this fight. And obviously, I'm showing you in slow motion. I'm showing you frame by frame because I don't want to get struck for copyright, but hopefully you'll get the idea. But basically, I could not believe, and I kept saying this on the live stream, how active Madrimov was with his feints. And it wasn't that I wasn't surprised in the sense of it being a good idea. And I've seen him do it in other fights that you call it pumping. He was pumping his guard constantly. And I've said this before, but I've always been told when I'm coached in boxing, you don't pump, you know, because your opponent will catch a rhythm with it, and it's not for any real purpose. But Madrimov does do it with a purpose, and he pumps because he's trying to. He has a sort of rhythmic feinting that he does, where he's moving constantly, and he's trying to create that indecision in you in when is he actually going to attack. So in this fight, you can see it here right at the beginning, as they come together here. And this is in round 3. And it happened from round 1. It was consistent throughout. We're just using the highlight video here to go through quickly. But you'll see here, straight away, a little dip of the leg there. And that draws a jab from Crawford. And what I really want to draw your attention to here is how close together their feet are. Because before the fight, I was constantly showing you, I was drawing arrows of the gap between the lead feet. And there's nothing between them really there. Helped by the fact that Crawford was in southpaw the whole fight. So he actually was, the lead feet were very close together the whole time. But it was something we hadn't really seen before from Madrimov. Was he made sure he got his feet close before he did anything. And he edged his way forward. He feinted his way into range in this fight. And you can see he does that first little feint there. And if I just edge it forward, he draws the jab from Crawford there. And then there again, a little dip down. Just sees how Crawford reacts and comes up again. And not only did it let him get closer, but it broke up Crawford's rhythm because he wasn't lunging in. And I feel like in this fight, Crawford was standing off a lot. He was doing those little half steps backwards. He was waiting for Madrimov to launch him with those attacks, just like Errol Spence did, just like many of his other opponents have done. One of the reasons I think they were comfortable picking him as an opponent was these lunging attacks that he felt fitted his style perfectly for countering. And but Madrimov just didn't do it. And there was only a few moments when he did it, and it was when Crawford was actually in motion. So when Crawford, an attack had broken off, he was moving to the side, moving laterally. That was when he would do it. And that's because when Crawford's in motion like that, he's not going to counter you. It's when he sets his feet, he's taking those little half sets back, creating a bit of space for himself. That's when you've got a problem. And Madrimov just didn't let him do it in this fight. And as part of that same sequence, again, it's a third feint in a row. Just dips here. Crawford takes his half step. And here, here he'll be waiting. He'll be waiting for the attack to come. He's got his hands nice and loose. He's ready for it, And again, look how close Madrimov's got here. But one key thing in this fight was he didn't throw very much. So he'd get himself into these positions, but even then he was wary of what Crawford could do with the counterattack. And it was only when he was really comfortable to actually aggressively explode that he would go. But you see here another little dip down. And it's just another little feint. And actually at the end of this highlight, it's quite interesting here. If you watch it, 3 feints from Madrimov in a row. And then Crawford actually eventually is able to land a really nice shot as Madrimov moves in. And it's because Crawford at this point has realised he's bouncing into range, he's feinting into range, he's coming close. And then Crawford times him nicely there with a little uppercut. But something Madrimov does do well here, that he didn't do in his other fights, is he pivots off at an angle. You see that? Makes a little angle there. And something that I'd noticed he did previously was he would bounce straight back out. And something else we saw in this fight was he has amazing athleticism, great legs, and he can move in and out of range really quickly, cover a lot of distance. But going backwards for him in this fight, that was actually a very good defensive move that he was able to use. But you see there, he's created an angle, and I didn't see him do that too much in his other fights, so that was a good little bit of skill there. The other thing I noticed in this fight was the way he was very disciplined with his guard. So because he's normally quite far out of range, he would carry a low lead hand, but you can see here in this shot, it's just from behind, but you can see glove there. Very defensively aware in this fight and disciplined with that high guard, and he took a lot of Crawford's punches on his gloves. Crawford had a good high guard too in the fight, but that's not something we're unused to seeing. Crawford's always had a good defense. But yeah, for Madrimov here, high guard, lots of feints, and he was very active, and his fitness was actually unbelievable. This shot here is actually a really good example of how Madrimov was able to land shots, and we talked before about that lunging, but what he did really well in this fight was he did explode into Crawford's range, but he did it from much, much closer. We just spoke about that before, how much closer the front feet were, and every round I was really noticing how close their lead feet were to one another, and I'd never really seen that with Madrimov before. And here you can see the benefits of that. So distance between them is pretty good here. We switched to red because I think it's a better color against the blue of the canvas, which it normally is. So yeah, we'll use the red moving forward. But yeah, so you can see that there. He's got his guard high. I can't see it on that side, but it's around there somewhere. And Crawford's got a low lead hand here. Backhand's in a decent position. But as I've said, Madrimov likes to lunge in with those straights. And when he's too far away, when fighters are too far away, we've seen it, I've spoken about it, Crawford times them. If not straight away, as the fight progresses, he'll start to find his timing and he'll knock you down or out. If we just edge it forward here, you see Madrimov dips down and then he explodes into the shot. And he goes right between Crawford's guard there. And it's a really good shot. And because he was close, he was able to land it. And with Crawford, with any fighter, it's much harder to counter if the punch is coming from a shorter distance. And that's one moment in the fight where Crawford didn't take that little half step back that he would normally like to do to create that bit of space. But a lot of that was to do with the fact that, Madrimov was using his feet so well and he was constantly feinting his way into range and getting there. And, he wasn't being reckless. And so that created opportunities like this for him. And I like this shot here. Fairly innocuous, but for me, it tells a tale. It tells a tale, this shot of Madrimov here. Again, the feet really close together. He's got a high guard there. He's looking through at Crawford to see what he's doing, but he's got a really high guard. And those were two of the things before the fight I was very concerned about. And just that one shot there, for me, it sums up the mindset. It sums up the tweaks that he made. And I thought Madrimov fought a really smart fight, to be honest with you. And he gave himself a good chance to get the win. However, I will speak about that guard again in a minute, because actually, as all great fighters do, Crawford did start to adapt as the fight went on, and that high guard I wouldn't say it was the undoing of him, but Crawford found a way to work with that, and I'll show you in a minute. Here's an example here of Madrimov throwing a hook. He didn't go too crazy with them in this fight. We know he likes that gazelle hook, but if we just edge it forward here, again, feet nice and close. I don't need to highlight that, so you've seen it enough. But we just edge it forward. You can see he likes to explode with that hook, and you can see the velocity he throws it at. And he lands on Crawford's guard there. But the point is that with that, he's close. He's close, and so he can get away with it. And because he's throwing with a lot of pace and a lot of power, it's hard to counter that. It's hard to do anything with that. Even though his hands are in a slightly low position, he's made Crawford shell up because he had to block that punch. And then he's throwing another big wild hook there. But again, he's done it all in a safe space. He's had to go there, hit the guard of Crawford, and he's made him think. And then he's got out again, and he's used those legs, he's used that bounce to get out of the space. And, it was good tactics from him. He managed to get close, as I keep saying, as I keep reiterating. But what I will also say in this fight is that I do think that Crawford felt the power a little bit differently. I know he said that he wasn't bothered by the 154 power. I know he said it felt the same as 147. However, I'm not convinced, because there was a couple of moments in the fight where I thought he might have taken a few more risks against the different fighters. So if I just show you this here, it doesn't look like there's a lot going on here, but I do see something here. So watching the pattern of this is a similar moment that I saw in the Spence fight that played out quite differently. So, and this is in round 7. So I would have expected Crawford to have started to find the range by now. Feet are close together here, as ever. Guard is high from Madrimov. Guard is high from Crawford. So you're in a pretty even position there. Both men could attack from this position. Now, what you're going to see is Crawford here, and I've shown you this before, he just wants to take a little half step back behind him because he's trying to make his man fall short. And when your man falls short, or not fall short, they can make contact with you, but you're trying to take some of the sting off the shot so that you've still got your bounce about you, so you can fire your counters and hope that they've not quite made the contact they wanted, so they're maybe falling forward a little bit, or maybe their arms are a bit loose. Anyway, if we clear that, you can see what Crawford does here. He takes that little half step. He just takes a little half step back. And they're in the same position again. But what he's hoping for is he's hoping for Madrimov to not account for that half step and throw from further away. But Madrimov, as you can see, there, he's followed him in. He's brought the feet close together again. So he's not at any point taking that bait of thinking he's moving backwards, I can go. So if we edge it forward again here, you can see now he's got his feet closed, he throws. And it goes just through the gloves of Crawford there. You can see it just lands. It's not super clean, but it's enough. And because it goes through the guard, it means that he's blinded. It means that he's got to ride the shot a little bit. It's not like when he catches it on his gloves and is able to throw. Not only that, but I would also suggest that, and also actually that's worth pointing out, look how wide Crawford's legs are here. Because he's had to absorb that shot, he's had to take another step, he's widened his stance, he's not really in a position to counter anymore, he's not as balanced as he would be normally. I think that's partially to do with Madrimov getting his feet into a good position, getting himself nice and close. It's also to do with his 154-pound power. I think it's not as easy to ride those shots, to catch them and throw back. But also, Madrimov's quite accurate with this. He goes through the guard. It doesn't land on the glove. And Crawford's got the high guard here, so he's not looking to catch and counter like he normally would do as much. I mean, I've seen him do it, so when it hits the glove, he then goes. But because he's off balance here, he can't really do that. And he's not caught it like a pat down and then gone. So, quite interesting. And I just wonder if at 147... it's easier for him to ride that power. I'm sure it is, and I definitely think that was another decisive factor in why he wasn't able to land, some of the effective counter punches I would have expected to see from him. Maybe not regularly because of the discipline Madrimov showed, but at least a bit more often than what we saw in the fight. And it's a good example here immediately afterwards of what I was just talking about before. And it's just a very small point, but just how bouncy Madrimov's legs are. See, Crawford misses there. He dips down, tries to throw another shot, hits the glove, and then he just springs. I mean, it doesn't look like much, but if I just put it here, he just jumps from here to here. And most fighters will take a step or they might run away a little bit, but he literally leaps. So that, I remember someone commented on one of my videos actually saying about how much power he had in his legs to spring backwards and forwards, which was why he could get away with pulling back in a straight line. And it was actually a really great point. Something I didn't really comment on in the first video. I was looking at it in a very traditionalist sense. I was like, what do fighters normally... What do you normally say you shouldn't do? You normally say you shouldn't pull out backwards in a straight line. But to be honest with you, he gets away with it so often because he does have immense power in his legs. I can't believe he doesn't have crazy DOMs after that fight because he moved so much. I just kept saying he's got to slow down, hasn't he? But he just didn't really slow down until later on. And then that's when Crawford, I think, started to have a bit more success in 11 and 12. One, because I think he turned up the heat a little bit, took a little bit more of a chance, but also I think Madrimov had slowed down just a touch. But you'll see there, he springs through the air, bounces back. And that's not even the best example of it. And he just bounces and he moves so quickly, gets around the ring so well. Again, it's the same example as I was talking about before. Because he got his foot close, lead leg nice and close, he was able to throw that backhand, that straight backhand. And because Crawford's got that high guard in that position there, and I think that is a little bit to do with the fearful mindset he had of the power, and the fact that he wasn't really getting away with taking those little half steps back when he was doing that. Madrimov wasn't throwing. Madrimov from there is able to just fire, and there you go. He hits him well there, hits him clean on the chin. Luckily for Crawford, he's still in a good defensive position. His chin's tucked down, so it's not too hurtful. And you see, Madrimov just pulls back and he's in the same position, and Crawford could come back with something a bit quicker there, but he's eaten one pretty solidly there. So countering's not as easy when you haven't made the miss to some degree, whether that's reducing the sting or whatever. Yeah. And again, he does exactly the same shot again here. So it's 2 in a row. And it's working well for him. And I did, the way that they're standing, I think Madrimov slightly, I can actually zoom in there, Madrimov slightly has his foot to the outside. They're pretty much straight in front of each other, but lined up in a way where his backhand is in play. And he's quite square here too. He's lined up so his backhand is in play. When I say square, his feet aren't too square, but if you look at his shoulders, his upper body is square. So the punch doesn't have too much of a distance to travel. And what he's done really well here is he's just made everything reach Terence Crawford in a shorter distance. That is the key with any good counterpuncher, is if you can land on them from a closer range, reduce the amount of time they have to read what you're doing, and then act, then you're winning. And he didn't quite win, unfortunately, but he did very well. And yeah, as I say, the feet are close together. He's got his backhand is close, and because Crawford is in the southpaw stance, the backhand is lined up directly. You can see because of that stance. And it does make you wonder, should Crawford potentially have switched to orthodox at some point? I know I was definitely surprised to not see him in orthodox. The reason was because when I watched the Spence fight, they were both fighting southpaw, and so it made it a lot easier for Crawford to parry that jab and fire back with his backhand. And so I was really surprised when he came out in southpaw every single round, and I thought at some point he was going to go orthodox and start trying to counter and time him. And honestly, I'm not exactly sure why he came out as a southpaw and stayed southpaw. I think it was to do with the lead hand battle, and because Madrimov is constantly feinting feinting and moving that jab, it did make me sort of wonder. I wonder if it's because he wants to touch that jab, he wants to control that jab of Madrimov. I think he was maybe worried about it, but I would love to know if anybody else has a reason or a take on why he came out southpaw every round, because I feel like there would have been more counter-attacking opportunities as an orthodox fighter in this fight. But let me know what you guys think. And this is just that second one I was trying to show you. Boom. Straight through. And it, as I say, he put himself in a position for success there, and it was just keeping Crawford honest when he was in the pocket. I want to take a quick look at this moment here, actually. And one thing I will say is that I suppose the benefit also of having your stance as a southpaw is your jab is over their jab, and so you can catch their jab and you can throw. If you think the opposition's going to have a low lead hand, to have your jab on the same side, the counter will be even faster. So potentially that was a factor in it. And you can see here a moment where Crawford's jab worked well. And actually, in general, I think Crawford's jab probably won him the fight. There was some close rounds where, he wasn't really landing clean counters or anything like that, but he was finding moments with the jab and landing the jab clean. And so really, for me, Crawford's main offensive weapon in this fight was the jab. I thought he used it well as more of an active punch. And he does use it well as an active punch. He's not always a counter puncher, and the jab was very active in this fight for Crawford. And I thought he did well. And excuse me, I noticed he was doing the sort of thing that Usyk does, where he has that circling hand, and then off the circle you can jab or you can feint, you can hook, you can go low, you can go high. And I feel like watching that, I noticed quite often that Crawford in this fight was using the jab for that. And so I do wonder if he was trying to deter Madrimov a little bit by having that jab a little bit closer to a point on Madrimov's body that he could land. And because, as I say, Madrimov typically can be a little bit lax with that lead hand, so he probably was thinking, I'm going to get opportunities to jab and get easy shots here. Unfortunately for him, for a lot of the fight, Madrimov had a very disciplined high guard, and as we have keep saying, he edged his way into range. Good moment here that I just want to show you. Madrimov's lead hand's a bit low, as we've talked about, it can be, and he's jabbed up, and Crawford's jabbed at exactly the same time, and he's jabbed him clean on the side of the head there. So I do wish I could just let the film run smoothly and I could just sort of, talk you through it at high speed so I could show you some of these things in a bit more detail. Unfortunately, as I say, we're using stills. Perhaps I'll set up a Patreon or something where we can do that. But yeah, lead southpaw jab, and I think that maybe is the reason that he stayed in southpaw all the fight. As I say, I still would have liked to have seen him go to orthodox at some point, try and counter him and time him, but I do want to make it clear as well that I told you my score at the start of the fight, and Crawford did win this fight. I've talked so far about why Madrimov did so well, but what I really want to do now, and I've just started talking about the jab, but I want to show you why Crawford won, what he was able to do, how he eventually created some openings, because he did win the fight for me. It was close, but he did win the fight, and testament to what a good fighter he is. He expected a different fight from this, as he said in his interview. As we all predicted, well, not as I predicted, I don't know about everybody else, as I predicted, I thought stylistically it would be a lot easier, and it wasn't. And it's important to see how he was able to adapt on the night and get the win. And I think in a rematch, actually, I think Crawford would probably win better. He'd be expecting a more cagey man in front of him. But he found a way, and that's what champions do. And he's up at a new weight, so I think he actually deserves a lot of credit for this performance. So we can see here, it's a similar situation to what we've seen throughout the fight. Madrimov's bouncing in and out of range, but he's getting his foot close, as ever, and it's a little bit further away this time. And this is later in the fight, this is round 11, and you can see here his hands are dropped. And these were the two rounds, 11 and 12, where Crawford had probably his outstanding moments in the fight. And you can see here that, he's been pumping all fight, but to me, at these points in the fight, as I mentioned, he'd slowed down a little bit, Madrimov, and his reflexes weren't quite as good. And Crawford got his confidence here. And you can see he's not got his high guard up anymore. This time, his hands are a little bit lower, and they're in that sort of, I like to call it like the engaged position where he's ready to attack. You're in a position there where you can do anything. You can catch, you can counter, you can get your high guard up. He's not just shelling up and, trying to ride out the Madrimov power. He now is ready to launch something. And if we just edge it forward here, you'll see Madrimov guard comes up, but it's not tight. And he fires that straight backhand right onto Madrimov's chin there. And it's a great shot. Really nice straight from Crawford there. And Madrimov just dips down. And Crawford doesn't follow it up because he's still wary and Madrimov's on balance. But you see a change in mindset from Crawford there. And I do believe he got braver because Madrimov got tireder. I really think that was the case. I'm not sure that if Madrimov from the first 10 rounds had been in those positions with him, I'm not sure he takes those chances as much. But so I know this section's about Crawford, but even here you can see I'm talking about Madrimov's legs. He throws the backhand Crawford a sort of hook. Madrimov dips down very athletically, and then you see he bounces. Big lunge away. And again, just the athleticism in his legs, it gives him... You can make up for huge technical deficiencies with athleticism, and fair play to Madrimov. He must be super fit. He must be unbelievably fit. And this is a good example here of another way Crawford found to attack. So both with high guards. Both with high guards. Very similar situation to what I was showing before, where Madrimov was having some of the better moments. But Crawford, looking through his high guard here, throws that jab. And he does what Madrimov's been doing to him. Splits straight through. And he knows that he's touched Madrimov, so Madrimov knows he's in range, so he's going to come back. Crawford just dips down. Madrimov misses that launching attack, that launching jab, and Crawford counters. It hits the gloves of Madrimov, but this is what we were talking about before the fight, these lunging shots, and because Crawford leans back, it's made a bit of extra space, and this is what I'm always talking about. It's that half space that Crawford tries to find. It's not a step here, it's a lean. And maybe he should have been doing this earlier in the fight, and maybe he did get more dialed in, maybe that's what it was, but you see, Crawford's head goes from here to here, which means Madrimov's got to get his shot there, which is another sort of half stride probably, and he's got to make up that extra ground. So he throws, it misses, and suddenly you've got a bit of space. And Crawford, what I love about Crawford is he's always looking. Look at his eyes. They are looking right there. His eyes are wide open, and he's ready to counter. And counter he does. Madrimov manages to block it. Again, very quick with his hands here. Look, like he goes from being in quite a precarious position to tucking up. Gloves in, chin behind them. That's actually defensively not bad, isn't it? And the amount of times we saw in his other fights where he'd go lunging in with that little sort of bow and arrow style jab, and he'd get caught and countered and caught. No, he wouldn't get countered and caught, but it was there. You could see it was there. Or he'd sort of dip down with his chin, but he was so disciplined here. And fair play to him, the speed, the alertness, even when tired, to get his hands in position. But from here, they both sort of pivot round, and Crawford's able to land a hook. It's actually quite hard to find new moments to really break down here, because a lot of it was just the odd jab and whatnot, and it's testament when you look at the highlights video. It doesn't look like a very exciting fight, and to be fair, there was long periods where it was very cagey, largely down to Madrimov's tactics and the fact that Crawford was expecting him to fight differently. He was expecting to be able to counter the way he normally does. But I will show you just a couple more moments that kind of illustrate Crawford's intelligence in the ring. But by and large, it was a cagey fight, I will say that. Last couple of rounds were a lot more exciting, but just a few little tricks. And then we'll have a little bit of a chat about where I think the two men can go from here, in particular Crawford. So this position here, it's quite interesting. So again, as they always were through the fight, I keep saying it, I sound boring, but the feet are close together. Madrimov's got his high guard. Crawford here is in a more of an offensive position. His hands are a bit lower. And he just dips his legs down here. And he stays. And he just pulls back. And this is what I was talking about before. He's trying to create little spits of space. He's trying to make you miss. He's trying to draw something from you, Crawford. And Madrimov just didn't really bite that often. This was earlier on. I think this was around round 4. And again, Madrimov just really wasn't biting on any of Crawford's little setups. But this one he did. And edge it forward here. Madrimov leans forward slightly. Crawford just pulls back. And as a result, the shot he's drawn from Madrimov there is the backhand. And he's fallen short with it. And as a result of that, and Madrimov has a habit of doing this when he does fall short, miss, or even sometimes when he lands and he wants to move out the pocket, he kind of slouches. He slouches over. You can see that position he's in there. He's sort of slouching over. And Crawford, as any good counterpuncher does, has his eyes on the target. And as a result of this, and again, the reason that they're not more damaging these moments in the fight is because Madrimov does such a good job of getting his hands back to his chin. And he does here, look, really quickly, hands up. But Crawford is able in the end to land a nice body shot. And that is a moment where, you know, the punch falling short from Madrimov worked out for him. But it wasn't even the first shot that was the counter that landed. It was a series later. You know, he had to throw one to land another one. And normally with Crawford, the counters are a lot cleaner. And all I can really say is fair play to Madrimov. You know, really did a good job of getting his guard up and covering himself up. And then when he was in a precarious situation, he'd use those legs to get out of range. And all of this sort of ripped up the script on my pre-fight prediction. Here again, Crawford was able to have a bit more success to the body. And we saw that a couple times in the fight. Nice little body shots from Crawford. Feet closed. Madrimov's gone with the lead hand here. And Crawford's just dipped inside. But at the same time, you can't quite see it here, but in the next round, he stepped his foot to the outside of Madrimov. And that is the advantage of being a southpaw against an orthodox, is being able to get your foot to the outside and bring your backhand into play, which unfortunately didn't happen too often. And it might have happened more had Crawford been willing to do that, but Madrimov was so active and so aggressive, in his physicality. Like, what I mean by that is, wasn't really aggressive with his punch output, but every movement he did was powerful, whether it was a punch or a step back or a lunge back or whatever. Very, very powerful. So hard to deal with that. But he's gone inside there and he whips in that uppercut, that backhand uppercut. And then he's able to land that nice lead hand to the body there. And because Madrimov's got that high guard, the body was there at times. And Crawford definitely capitalized on that from moment to moment. And this was a nice moment here in the 11th when Crawford was able to capitalize a bit more on Madrimov. Madrimov's lazier tendencies. And it wasn't laziness so much, it was more the wrong option. Using the pawing jab when he probably should have pushed it a bit harder or taken a step back. Again, I think it was just physical fatigue. He worked a lot harder than Crawford did in this fight. Crawford was able to just sit and wait a lot of the time. Madrimov was having to constantly feint to keep his man honest. So you can see here, Crawford makes sure he gets his foot nice and close, almost on top of Madrimov's foot. And Madrimov just pours the jab out and it doesn't go anywhere. And from this moment here, this is great. This is a very good counterpunch because it actually goes straight back to Madrimov's chin. This position here, if that goes where it normally goes low, if it goes to there, so if it goes from there to there like it often can for many fighters, then he's in big trouble. But, Crawford actually is just so sharp here. He immediately throws the backhand. So as Madrimov's bringing his hand back, even though it gets to his chin, Crawford's backhand is traveling at such velocity and they're so close. You can see he's stepped. And I always like to look at the foot position. But you can see he's stepped almost beyond Madrimov's foot there. So the backhand's nicely lined up. He split Madrimov's guard. And then he's gone again. Straight down the middle with the lead hand. And we talked before about before the fight about Crawford's lead hand, the power he has in that lead jab. And there he's able to just send it straight through the same gap he's created and land clean. He doesn't quite, and then he sort of hits the guard a little bit there, I think. But again, a nice moment from Crawford. Nice inventiveness. And I think people were just disappointed we didn't see more of that in this fight. I think this was the first fight in 11 fights. He didn't get a stoppage. Understandable with the bigger man. And, Crawford was a bit more tentative than normal, I will say that. And he says it felt fine, so maybe in the future at 154, and if we see him higher, he won't be as tentative. Now he's used to it. If it is the same as what he normally says, I just don't believe that. I think Madrimov was easily the best opponent he's faced, the most physical opponent he's faced. And so I think that actually he was just cautious of the power and he didn't mind winning a points decision. Who would? His fourth division where he's been a world champion now. So we move. Actually, I've got to give a shout out to a page I saw on Instagram called Boxing Science, I think it is. Boxing Sciences or something like that. And they were showing Crawford's effectiveness at guard manipulation. So how and I've seen other fighters do this where they punch a glove and then they'll hold their hand there for a moment, they'll pull their glove down and then they'll fire another shot in and they'll do it to each side and they'll just keep pulling the gloves down and firing shots in. And there was moments in the fight where, Madrimov's got this high guard, so he's like, right, let me create some space for myself. Let me manipulate this high guard. So there's a really nice shot here of Crawford hitting a glove and then just keeping his hand there a moment just to make sure it's not going to block what he throws. And let's just edge it forward here. So you'll see he throws that backhand hook. But then you see there, that moment there, he doesn't pull his glove straight back. You see he's holding Madrimov's glove in position there. He's got his hand hooked round. So Madrimov can't get it back to his chin. And you can see he's thinking about one thing here, Crawford. His eyes are straight on his eyes. The eyes don't lie, as they say. And if we just edge it forward again, you'll see, boom, big shot down the middle. And that's lovely. And then you see in that same sequence, right again, rather than pulling his hand back, Crawford, he just holds it there. He holds it there. And by doing that, by keeping his glove there, I suppose this clips less guard manipulation. You'll have to go and check it out on their page because I'm not quite sure when it was in the fight. But it's not so much guard manipulation there so much as he's just keeping him. He can't spin out to the side. He's holding him there. The glove is slightly hooked, so he probably can't really go backwards either. And he's just been hit clean. So he's sort of holding in position. And that allows him to fire another shot in, as you'll see. Right there, around the side. And it's not going to be comfortable to receive one of those. So guys, in summary, what did we learn in this fight? Well, Madrimov is an adaptable guy, tactically adaptable. He can fight in different ways. He doesn't have to be reckless. He can fight in an elite fashion, because that's what these top-level fights are all about. You've got to raise your game. You've got to be defensively astute. You've got to take your time. And he did all those things. I think my only criticism of him would be that he probably should have gone for Crawford a little bit more. He had chances to. He had moments where Crawford was more defensive-minded than normal, where he wasn't really looking to counter so much. And if it hadn't been Terence Crawford in front of him, if he hadn't had that level of respect, I wonder if he would have gone for a bit more Madrimov. But, you know, my comment is similar to Crawford. Not so much respecting Madrimov, a little bit though. It was respecting the power of Madrimov and not really knowing what you're in there with. It was more the unknown for Crawford, I think, that made him apprehensive. And he would have felt Madrimov's power, and he would have been like, this guy is powerful, and I can't be getting hit clean by this guy. You know, we have seen Crawford hurt before by smaller men, so he knows he can't be hit clean, as most men can't be hit clean, and expect to walk away unscathed. But, you know, the big thing here in this fight, for me, was Madrimov's discipline, was the fact that Crawford expected a very different Madrimov to come into the ring to the one that showed up. I wish I could show you more. I wish I could play the whole thing for you, but I really recommend you go and watch the full fight highlights and see what you guys can see. Have a look, see what you're noticing about this fight. I do think Crawford won the fight. Again, the rounds he won, they weren't the most entertaining if you're a neutral. I enjoyed it because, you know, especially having done that analysis, I really was excited to see if how I'd called it was how it was going to play out. But no, it wasn't at all. It wasn't at all. And you know, it was great actually to see Madrimov going like that. And I did caveat everything I said by saying, you know, Madrimov could come in this fight in a different fashion. And that's exactly what he did. And just as well that he did, because I think he might have faced some issues if he hadn't. But I wonder, where does Crawford go from here? Because there's been all this talk of a Canelo fight. And, you know, I know some people out there think, well, if you can't handle Madrimov, how are you going to handle Canelo, who's 2 weight divisions bigger? You know, it's a full 14 pounds heavier at the weigh-in. Forget about the rehydration. And, you know, people now think Crawford's probably too small for Canelo. To be honest with you guys, the size is a factor for sure. But this hasn't made me think that much less that Crawford could give Canelo problems. I do think that we saw a tentativeness from Crawford that we've not seen before. But equally, that's a very, very different fight. You know, Canelo does not have the legs that Madrimov has. Canelo stays in your range, in your space. He isn't leaping in and out. You know, he's not, I don't think he's as fast with his feet as Madrimov either. He definitely punches really hard, Canelo. But like Crawford, he can be a bit of a counter-puncher, or he is a counter-puncher, really. He's a come-forward counter-puncher. So he's trying to make you miss. But I think it would be very, very cagey. And I think Canelo probably has more ways of winning the fight because, you know, he is the bigger, stronger man. So he probably can walk Crawford down. There probably is that option available to him. But Crawford is accurate. And, you know, because that's such a big legacy fight, because, you know, Crawford's not losing as much in losing that fight, in a sense. He's got up such a distance. Maybe he'd take more chances. Maybe he'd be a bit more aggressive. I don't know. I'm not against seeing the fight. I'm really not. I'd be quite intrigued. I would like to see Crawford potentially have a fight at 160 before he did that. I'm not sure in my mind right now. That's probably a video for another day. Who does Crawford actually fight next if Canelo's not available? But has this made me want to see the Canelo fight less? Is the question I'm trying to answer. And honestly, the answer is no, because I just think Canelo and Madrimov are such different fighters. And Canelo has slowed down a bit. His punch output isn't as high as it used to be. His head movement isn't as good as it used to be, in that it's probably as good in patches, but he can't do it as consistently because of how exhausted it makes you. And, you know, if he did get tired quickly in that fight, we saw what happened to Madrimov when he got tired at the end, finally. And we saw the amount of feints, the amount of work that Madrimov had to do to keep Crawford at base. I still think there's an intrigue for me in that Canelo fight and what he could do in that fight. So yeah, guys, but please, if you've enjoyed this, like the video, please subscribe to my channel, a guy called Henry. Coming up soon, I'm waiting for the fight to be announced, to be honest with you, but we will be doing a Tank Shakur game film analysis. That has to happen. I'm going to do a Joshua Dubois game film analysis. I've talked about the fight, but I would like to actually show you on game film what I see happening in that fight. And, you know, whenever I do these game films, I always notice new things. So I'm sure there'll be some new things to look at in that. I will probably look at Canelo Berlanga as well, see if Berlanga actually has a chance. As I said, I don't know that much about Berlanga, so I'll actually be interested to watch him and see, is he this mediocre fighter I think he is, or is that just a media perception? I'm not sure. But anyway, guys, hope you've enjoyed the video. And as I always say, on to the next one.